Joe, you're laughing. What are you laughing at?
I'm just finding out that right now.
Did you not know?
God, no. So he's out. And
he's out for 3 months, and United knew he had a metatarsal issue before they signed him.
Is this player potentially going to be world class?
Yeah.
Do we honestly look at him and believe this player is, I know you hate the expression, but let me use it, generational?
Hello, welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is Off the Bar. We are going to be talking about Manchester United's seismic summer, as Laurie Whitwell puts it in The Athletic. He's done a deep dive on everything going on behind the scenes at what has been a massive, massive time of change at Manchester United. We've got all the inside gossip, all the inside knowledge. We're going to be going through exactly what has happened and why Man United is almost unrecognisable from even 6 months ago, let alone, the last decade that we've seen all this failure. I'm joined by Joe McGrath. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Man United top?
Do you know what? It's the first thing I bought for United in about 12 years.
Really?
Yeah, and I just like the look of it, and I thought, you know what? At least 25% is going to a good cause.
Yeah.
So I bought that, and here we are, and I'm rocking it today. It's a good fit as well.
It is nice. It does fit you well. Yeah. It's got some nice pattern work going on.
I was going to go for the third away top, but I just thought this. I'll ease my way in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I like that. It's lovely.
Guess where the person put it? In the black bin, which for me is my rubbish bin.
That's not allowed. Blue bin is okay because it's usually dry
cardboard.
It's dry cardboard. You can't be putting it in with potentially bags of dog poo in the black bin.
Bad, that, innit?
Put what in the black bin?
The delivery.
I wasn't in the delivery.
Oh, they just put it in a black bin?
Yeah,
They proper binned it?
It's because, I'll tell you what it was, because the blue bin and the brown bin were out because it's their bin day.
On holiday.
This is very boring. But the black bin was still by the door. So you must have just thought, but there's all sorts in there.
Yeah, that's
tell you what, black bin day in our house is like, that's the highlight of our...
Is it? Oh, yeah,
black bin day is like...
We were out the other day. Your kids rang you because it was black bin day.
Yeah, they did. They rang me. They have a dance, black bin day dance. They do. My kids have a black bin day dance where they do a little dance. My youngest does a little dance because it's black bin day.
Why did they love it so much?
Because my missus gets so excited because it's black bin day. Because in our house we have to make about 8 trips to the tip, because you just go through rubbish like no one's business. So yeah, Black Bin Day is the highlight of my season.
It's not just you taking out the trash, because INEOS have come in and immediately made changes at Manchester United. You can keep that. Let's start from the top, but there's a lot to get in here in terms of recruitment philosophy, in terms of how United are bringing in players, also the way that they've changed morale around the club whilst having these massive job cuts and layoffs as well. Also, the new structure at the top, which we all know, but let's revisit that to start with before we get into some of this sort of new detailed information. Obviously, we've seen Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth, Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell come in as new all the way from basically board level down to just above the manager. None of these people were at the club in January. Now all of a sudden we're going into a new season with basically an entirely new backroom staff at Manchester United. As far as the running day-to-day of Man United is concerned, it is almost entirely different, isn't it, Jay?
Yeah, it is. And when people used to ask me about the Glazers or argue with me about the Glazers, and they'll say, how can you moan all the time about the Glazers? Like, United spend money, United do this and that. And I say, well, you get into it and you go, well, look at the debt we're in, look at the fact the stadium is crumbling. And one of the other things I used to bring up, look at the lack of structure at the club. Look at the way the Glazers have put people like Ed Woodward, who's a banker, in charge of footballing decisions, which has led to basically 11 years of underwhelming football and underachieving. This is what needed to happen. This is what INEOS have done. They've come in and they've gone, right, who are the best in class? Who are the people that can bring success back to Manchester United? So they've looked at Manchester City and, okay, they've got 115 charges hanging over their head, but they've had a lot of success. And they've gone, who's there? Who's involved that we could get? Omar Barada. Now, you might have looked at him and gone, well, we ain't getting him from City. And they've gone, well, we'll offer him the CEO job. We probably can. And they've got him in. Jason Wilcox, I know he's at Southampton, but he'd been part of the City's academy setup, which has seen a lot of good players come through their youth. Bringing him in as well. Dan Ashworth. There was a reason why Newcastle didn't want to let him go. There's a reason why we had to go sort of have this argument and this back and forth over his compensation or their compensation, is because he was so highly regarded, because what he'd done was part of the England setup, what he'd done I think at Brighton, and what he'd done at Newcastle as well. So they've got in these people who are the best in class, the ones that you look at and go, okay, they've had a lot of success, they know what they're doing, and they can oversee the structure and hopefully bring that success to Manchester United. So it is exciting. And Christopher Vell, I don't know a lot about him, but again, he's one of those people that, if you're going off what the other ones they've brought in that you do know a little bit about, you'd expect him to have a certain pedigree there. Yeah. And that's what Manchester United needed, because the fact we've spent so much money, and wasted so much is another indictment of the fact we haven't had a proper structure in the club, because you've got this position in the situation at Manchester United where a manager will come in and that'll be someone like, let's say, for example, Jose Mourinho, and he's like, I want a big striker who's a bit of a battering ram, but who can get on the end of things and who can run in behind as well a little bit. Get me, Romelu Lukaku or whatever. And then you get him in, and then when he gets sacked, Ollie comes in and he goes, well, I don't want Romelu Lukaku, I don't want Alexis Sanchez, they're not my players, let's get rid of them. And you go through this cycle. Now with a proper structure in place, you can go, these are players that, regardless of what happens with the manager, or if it doesn't work out with this manager, we'll bring in a manager who can work with these players because there is a structure there. Also, we'll identify players that can work with this manager. We won't just leave it to him, and we won't just sort of go out and buy the most expensive defender or midfielder or attacker we can get. It does feel like already we're seeing the effects of having this structure in place. I know it's early doors, but I'm very excited. And me and you and the rest of the gang were away on pre-season, and we went to open training. Can you imagine going to an open training session back in the day and seeing the likes of, I don't know, Avram Glazer and Ed Woodward or whoever mingling with the players? Yeah, we went to open training. You saw Dan Ashworth, you saw Jason Wilcox. Barada was at events we went to. Yeah. Talking to fans, let alone the players and the coaching staff. It's just something I'm not used to at Manchester United, and long may it continue.
It's a completely different feel. And Jay mentioned about the money spent there. We'll get into the transfer sort of tactics and philosophies that have been underpinned this summer. But just generally speaking, people, non-United fans, you see pundits say it. Someone said it to me the other week. We did a podcast with Everton, Spurs and Liverpool fans. Yeah. And one of the things that they said to me that I had to defend was, well, United have spent loads of money. So you can't complain about the Glazers because they've spent loads of money. But it's very easy to waste money in football, isn't it? If you've got the wrong people spending that money, like Jay said, the likes of Ed Woodward, how easy has it been to waste those billions that we've spent in the last sort of 10, 15 years?
It felt very much like some of our transfers have been like headline-grabbing transfers where we bought certain players that might not fit the mould, but for Man United, and we know Edward was quite driven by the fact that we were a brand, and he was more focused on the business of Man United rather than the actual what happened on the pitch. I remember just a series of bad results. Then United brought out a port, but don't forget about the bad results. Our app on the iPhone has got 5 stars. And it's like
and there's
stuff like
fan sentiment graphs. And I remember when they released after, I think it might have been the Pogba one, or maybe it was Sanchez. Yeah. One of the big signings anyway. They released, this was the most impressions of any transfer ever.
Yes.
And that was like all that mattered to them.
It is, but if it's not a success on the pitch, then those fans at the end of the day really don't really care about it. So I'm excited that there's going to be people in charge of our money in a better way. I think it's quite interesting as a business point of view, and we'll see, I'm sure these are all very professional men, how the spine of United's backboard has just been sort of ripped out and brand new people have come in. I hope they bond well and work well together and there's no clashes. These people might have different ways of working, and I hope they can just, it feels very much like they've just thrown them straight into the job. So I hope the staff around there, because Manchester United is very different to any other club, and Barada's even mentioned that in one of his
he said it recently.
Completely different. So I hope these guys have settled now, they've got themselves ready, they know their targets, they know their goals. And it's exciting because these look like clever people. Like clever people.
And they're successful people. That Barada one was interesting because this was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? Where he said, like,
statement.
As a lot of players say this, managers say this, and now we've got the CEO saying this, where, like, I almost didn't realise how big United was till I got here. Because I would guess, you're working at City, you go into work, you're walking through the car park, someone might know who you are. Oh, that's the it was technical director, whatever it was at City. Oh, yeah, that's him. You go to Man United, you're a celebrity. Omar Barada has had more lines in the newspaper in the last 2 months than he will have had in his career before that. It's a completely different thing. And I think that these people realising that quickly before the season's even started, and actually how do we sort of guide this absolute Goliath beast that is Manchester United? Because there are plenty of companies in the world that make more money than Man United, but there are very, very, very few companies in the world that are adored and talked about and cared about as much as Man United. No one's like a big Google fan. No one's like, oh, I love Google. I'll go to Google conferences here, there and everywhere. But like football is a completely different world to business, and people have to remember that. Because business-wise, how many companies in the world make 600 million a year? Shitloads. No one, except maybe Real Madrid, is spoken about and adored the way Manchester United is. So that's a massive thing, and it feels as though we've got people in who actually understand that a little bit more now, rather than Ed Woodward wanting to turn us into of this sort of business powerhouse that all it cares about is money.
Yeah.
That's not really what a football club is. It's more about the other stuff than it is about the money. Obviously, you have to take care of that as well. Speaking of money, and this is the sort of downside to all of that, restructuring, and this is a point in the article as well from Laurie that we mentioned, that around 250 job cuts have taken place, creating a bit of a tense atmosphere amongst some of the remaining staff. Obviously, you're sort of looking over your shoulder a bit. Almost undoubtedly, some of your friends have left, maybe even family members have left, because a lot of people, live locally, work locally, and are United fans. So the people within the community that have now not got jobs.
I think also,
how does that make you feel?
Well, I think as well, just looking back at the year since Glazers announced that they were looking for alternative ways to run Man United, every single person must have had anxiety and worries about their jobs, which has come true now.
Yeah.
So you got to think that process of Glazers looking for, Sir Jim Ratcliffe as it was, lasted about a year, didn't it?
Yeah.
And can you imagine what it must have been like on your day to day, not knowing if the club that you're working for might actually keep you in the job in a year's time? You're not a footballer. You can't just go and live off your wages that you've just earned over the last week. These are people who were earning, average salaries that are worrying. I really think you can look back, and we will look back in 10 years' time at that period of time where the Glazers put us up for sale, or how they worded it, and think we were sort of broken, but not from the players' point of view, from us as a club. And that fear has come true, which is sad that there was people who've lost their jobs. And are these... What do we know much about the actual roles, or are they just...
I think it
seems to be a little bit across everything.
Yeah, I think it's scattered throughout the club. And I was chatting to someone the other day, said like some of the photographers, this was only like a couple of days ago, who've been at the club for years, a couple of them have just recently left. I think they were offered a redundancy.
Really?
And I think it saddens me a little bit, because I've always thought of Manchester United as being a little bit classier than other clubs. I've always thought there is still that little bit of almost like a family feel to it. And I know that might be me being a little bit sort of sentimental and naive, but I've always felt like that. Felt like there is that little bit about Manchester United that has that connection. And when you lose that, it is sad to see. And I think that a lot of these staff were at United and they're on poor wages, or, just like minimum wage or whatever, or living wage. But it's like, well, you're working at Manchester United. A lot of them are Reds, they're not United fans, and that's why they're paid not great wage, but they're happy to be there because they're working as part of a club that they love. So when you see so many of them have lost their job, and it's not like they've lost the job because they've not been doing a good enough job or not been working hard enough. They've lost the job because INEOS have basically come in and decided to cut a load of costs. So they've said, all right, we've got too many staff. And then you see 250 people who are now, on the dole, and it is sad to see. And I feel for the people that have been affected by it, because when you look at how much money we've wasted on wages and transfers and just nonsense and helicopter rides for the Glazers or whatever to Wembley and just stupidness like that, and then you're having to cut 250 people out of from their jobs. It's sad to see, and
it's such an interesting working environment, knowing that if you work for Man United, there's someone in, like, cause I don't know if that was the case in any way you've worked, but someone who is also employed by Man United earns in a week what you'd love to earn in a year, and that's the players. Obviously, there's such a sort of vast gap between the people who make Man United from the lower grounds to actually the stars on the pitch, and it's sad that those ones that actually do love and care for Man United are going to go. But
it is, and I agree with everything you've said there, by the way, in terms of the jobs themselves. So I don't want the only thing I say to be kind of not agreeing with it, but sort of looking at it from a different angle, and not say that I think it's awful that people have lost their jobs.
I hear your point.
One problem,
devil's advocate or whatever,
could be that the Glazers have allowed a sort of bloated number of staff, and if they hadn't have hired as many people as they did in the first place, maybe wouldn't have had to cut costs in this way. And obviously I'm not just blaming the Glazers, because INEOS have made this decision and it's a shit one for everyone involved, but by all accounts, United had more staff than pretty much any other football club in England.
Can I say
by a substantial amount, and maybe that shouldn't have been allowed to happen in the first place.
I've done jobs in the past in radio, and I know this is completely different, where there was a job created for the sole focus to do maybe one little thing an hour, and I thought to myself, this job could go. This job doesn't need to exist. I've been in those roles, but what has happened is when there's money or there's problems and there's flurry of money, they go, just create someone to do that. That's a problem. Someone can look after that. I've sat in roles where I'm like, I don't really need to be here. Like someone else could do it. And I think maybe that's what they've done. They've seen the roles where maybe others can shift inwards, make people work a little bit harder, which is tight because obviously their roles day to day are probably tough enough. But I can imagine people's workload who still have a job for United is getting more
that's
intense.
the other side of it as well. The people who have now had to absorb the workload of those 250 people have got more work to do, which isn't fun for them either.
I get your point, John. I've seen the other side. I've seen people I used to work in radio with who've gone to a job where they've gone, we used to work at a small radio station. I was doing all this work, and now there's 8 of us doing the one job that I used to do. And it's, I get your point now. I've seen that happen where people have been like, wow, this is amazing. But just from the optics of it as well, and when you look at how much money's been wasted on dividends, on these loans the Glazers have had, on wages for players that have just been terrible, and then you've had to go and cut these costs elsewhere. And yes, we might have more staff than anyone else, but we're the biggest club in the land by a country mile.
That's true.
So I would expect us to have more staff than anyone else, to be honest with you. So, okay, if you actually were to scratch beneath the surface, maybe some of these jobs are unnecessary. Maybe this was something that INEOS had to do. But it doesn't look great. It doesn't look great when you've wasted all this money. It doesn't look great as one of your first moves as this sort of, United fan, man of the people kind of guy. You're coming in and you're going, all right, I'm going to lay off 250 people. Just from the optics of it, isn't great.
No, it's not.
Especially when we all know, and we've all sat around this table discussing how much money Manchester United have wasted. And we've wasted millions and millions and millions on poor players, on wages for poor players, on dividends, on these paying back this leverage buyout, on this debt. All that money has gone out the window, and it's been just completely pointless, really. It hasn't served any purpose for Manchester United in a positive way. And you think probably about 1,000th of that would have paid for these 250 staff members for the rest of their lives.
And maybe,
so it is
exactly
maybe it could have been a different thing where, and obviously this might be one of those things that's completely unfeasible, but for instance, we've identified 600 roles where when people leave that job and they go in somewhere else, just or they retire or whatever, we don't then replace it. So maybe over the next 10 years we cut 250 jobs rather than just sacking people. I don't know, that might just not be possible, but obviously there's a rotation of staff going on at every business. Maybe you just don't replace those roles, so you're not sacking someone.
You make a good point, I get that. Some of the things they've done though, for me, just seem stupid. I know like these are savvy businessmen who know far more about business than I ever will, but like, was it cutting the travel for staff to Wembley? Yeah. Like, come on, how much is that saving?
Yeah, really? What are you saving there? Like $5,000.
Yeah, and also I think was it the players' families didn't get free travel to Wembley? It didn't, but that can affect your morale as a player. Even like the club being this petty.
They've got to gauge travel.
It's just a bit like that to me. Just seemed petty and stupid because what did it actually save in the grand scheme of things? Next to nothing.
But my little theory on that is that part of why they're doing these things isn't just because of the effect they'll have. For instance, no more working from home, you have to be in the office. Yeah. I think there's studies that show that generally speaking, productivity isn't really improved by being in the office as opposed to working from home if it's a job that allows for it. But I think that some of these things, the coach stuff, how much it's put, obviously these aren't just like the cheap coaches that we might get, these are nice luxury coaches for the family, but it's a few £1,000s, which is a fraction of any one of those players' weekly wage, let alone yearly. So, but I think some of it is, they wanted everyone at Manchester United, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a player, whether you're on the board, whether you mow the grass, everyone needs to feel a tangible difference that we are here now.
I agree with that.
You feel our presence on your day-to-day, and I think some of that is very harsh and unfair and potentially unnecessary. But no one at Man United doesn't know INEOS is here.
Because sometimes control.
Yeah, because sometimes a new boss comes in, or we've been bought out by this company, and it's business as usual, as you were. Everyone feels that INEOS is here, and maybe in their head, that's part of an overall thing of like, just turning the soil a little bit at Man United. Things have gone a bit stale, things have gone a bit sort of dry. We're just turning the soil, and everyone knows we're here now. Whether that's the right thing to do or not, I don't know, but I wonder if that's part of the thinking of like, no one thinks that it's still the Glazers. Everyone feels INEOS as sort of their hand on their shoulder a little bit. But again, the way they've done that, we can get into a debate for hours on that, and we obviously don't agree with all of it, definitely with what they've done. Let's move on to some of the on-the-pitch stuff a little bit more then.
Yeah.
recruitment philosophy shift, and this is another thing that's mentioned. There's a few different avenues in this. I want to talk about fees, I want to talk about profile of players, and I want to talk about long-term vision as well, and we'll start with that. Laurie mentions United's decision to sign Lenny Yoro, despite knowing that he had a potential metatarsal issue that came up during his medical. So it says there, new signing Lenny Yoro was known to have a potential metatarsal issue, but United took a long-term view. Joe, you're laughing. What are you laughing at?
I just found out that right now.
Did you not know?
God, no. So he's out. And
he's out for 3 months, and United knew he had a metatarsal issue before they signed him.
It sounds a little bit daft, doesn't it, when you say it out loud?
It does, but I think if you're looking at it, you're going, okay, is this player potentially going to be world class?
Yeah.
Do we honestly look at him and believe this player is, I know you hate the expression, but let me use it, generational? Is he going to be like Kobe Mainu levels of this kid is gifted? Yeah? I know, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
If he is, then you'll honestly, hand on your heart, believe he could play for Manchester United for the next decade.
Oh, yeah. 400 appearances, 500
he's got that in him.
Yeah.
He could be someone who's in our defence from now until 10 years later or whatever. So, is it worth stomaching a bit of a risky first few seasons, or not first few seasons, sorry, first few months? Is it worth it? Is that worth the risk?
We're about to find out, aren't we?
Yeah. So I get it. I get the sort of the thinking behind it, because it's like, okay, we're not going to sign him because he's got this metatarsal issue. He goes to Real Madrid. First few months he's got this issue or whatever, and then after the first few months he plays for Real Madrid for the next 400 games, or for the next 10 seasons, wins loads of trophies and all the rest of it.
Was it worth it?
Yeah, I understand the thinking, because you are thinking more long term. And I think that the issue with Lenny Yoro, or the question I've got is he as good as we were led to believe? Yeah. We won't know until we start seeing him in a United shirt. But certainly everyone who's watched him and everyone who's been, sort of in the know, if you will, says that this kid is genuinely gifted. I just wait and see.
Yeah,
if it turns out to be the case, because we've heard it before with certain players, and it hasn't quite worked out like that. We've had these players and we go, this guy is going to be, I remember when there was the thinking was that Chris Smalling and Phil Jones were going to take over from Rio Ferdinand and Nemanja Vidic. Yeah. Like, genuine, that was the thinking. Yeah. It was, we laugh, but it was them two and Johnny Evans, that's going to be your future of Manchester United. And within, I think 3 or 4 years, I think Evans had left and Jones had become almost a figure of fun, and Smalling was dropped. So I'm not saying that he's on the same level as those players. I'm just saying we have been in this position before where we've gone, this is the future, and it hasn't worked out that way. So let's wait and see what happens. Yeah. But I get it.
Just from a recruitment sort of philosophy perspective, if we go back to, I know obviously United haven't exclusively signed people in their 30s, but let's say the same metatarsal injury that could keep someone out for 2 to 6 months was detected in 33-year-old Cavani, or 35-year-old Zlatan Ibrahimovic, or 37-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo. Would we have signed them still? Because it wouldn't have made any sense whatsoever. Yeah. So the fact that it's an 18-year-old that we're detecting this issue in, immediately to me shows a change in philosophy. And I know we've signed youngsters as well in that time, but we haven't signed anyone over the age of 25 so far this window. Does that to you say we are doing things differently, even though signing an injured player isn't ideal? If that player was 35, that transfer wouldn't be possible, would it? You just couldn't do what we've done here.
It's definitely a sort of different excitement as a fan when players that are a little bit young but have so much potential comes in. It really gets you in a bit of a different way. For example, when we signed Varane and when we signed Casemiro, it was great when they came onto the pitch and they're the first games for United. But realistically, though, you knew that this might only last 2-3 years, and it did with Varane. He came in 2 seasons. Was it 3 seasons total? Maybe
he's done 2. Varane, sorry, he did 4 in the end. Yeah,
and then obviously he's gone. And what I'm excited more with the youngsters is we can maybe get more longevity off them, and we can see the fruits of our labour last for years and years and years. Yeah. Rather than Varane, we got excited, it was great. I mean, he helped us to get to some trophies, and we'll always love him, but he never had that longevity at the club where he could be called a Man United like all-time legend. Whereas if Yoro's here for 10 years and Mainu, like you mentioned, and other stars that are coming through, we could actually look back at this in 5-6 years when we're fighting for titles again and think this was a great signing. I'm glad we did it. But we're always slightly sort of teased as United fans in this last season or two with injuries. It's a lot of what ifs. What if Martinez and Yoro are the best thing since Vidic and Ferdinand? And I hope we have sustainability there, and they can bond and work together. Because if them two are firing at their best, and Yoro turns into the player that he can be, and Martinez, we know how good he is.
Yeah.
What a two. What a partnership that is.
Another thing in terms of the recruitment philosophy that's different, and I saw it mentioned in the MEN, and we can just see it for ourselves, and it's something that City did for a long time, other than I think Grealish and maybe Gvardiol as well now. There's maybe a few small examples there, but they had this sort of soft limit of £60 million. For a very long time, City's squad was made up with players who cost 60 million or less. It was like maybe Mahrez was 65, but you look at De Bruyne, Diaz, Laporte, Stones, Kyle Walker, Aguero, everyone in that team pretty much, other than a couple of recent year kind of examples. That squad was built out of 40, 50 and 60 million pound players.
Yeah.
That's what United have done this summer. I mean, Lenny Yoro is the most expensive signing. He's 60 million euros, which is around 50 million pounds, and everyone else is under that. And what we're seeing is the squad as a whole is coming up in quality. You may not be getting those like Pogba's, Lukaku's, Casemiro's, like people that come in on crazy money and crazy wages, but you're building a 15, 16, 17 man squad of real top players in every position. Has that been something that you've noticed and that you like the look of?
I do like the look of it. I do, because I feel like the squad depth has obviously been a massive issue for Manchester United. The drop-off you're always talking about, and you're right, when you're having to play players out of position, you're having to... There's times last season, you looked at our bench, and we all follow Manchester United avidly, and there was players on the bench that didn't even know who they were.
Yeah.
Like, we had like children
regularly
on the bench.
as well.
I'm not knocking these kids, because they're amazingly talented young footballers, but they shouldn't be relied upon to help Manchester United drag ourselves off mid-table, which is where we'd come to, because we just didn't have the strength and depth in the squad. And I know we had a massively injury-ravaged season, but even so, we were short in squad numbers. And you look at these players, and what I like about these players as well is, when you've got those players you mentioned, Joe, where you've paid like 40 million euros, 50 million euros, 50 million, whatever, if you need to drop them or rest them or whatever, there doesn't become this issue around it. If you've spent 80 million quid on Anthony and you drop him, people go, why have you just bought him?
Completely agree.
What are you doing with him? We've just spent all this money and he's not even starting. You mental.
You're thick, he's shit, and United are clueless.
Yeah,
but that's the narrative. Maguire, Anthony, Pogba,
they can't be dropped.
They have to play.
They have to play because you've spent a fortune on him. You've made him the most expensive midfielder ever, the most expensive defender ever, the most expensive Ajax sale ever. Yeah. Like, people are going, well, he's got to start because you spent all this money. If you're going, Joshua Zirkzee, he's going to be a sub. What, you spent 40 million euros on a sub? Yes.
Yeah.
I did. And it's like, just that sort of attitude helps as well, because it stops all this nonsense and noise that can build around certain players and get in the manager's head, where it's like people questioning, well, hang on a minute, you've spent all this money. So I think just from that kind of point of view is helpful. And also the fact that we knew, right, with PSR and everything else that Manchester United were going to do this summer, we're having to go for it, every club has to go for it. We couldn't go out and spend £100 million on João Neves or whatever when we were linked with him for 100 million. Even Jared Branthwaite for 70 million seemed like a stretch, because it could be, okay, you get Neves and you get Branthwaite and that's it.
You're done.
That's your budget. And if those two, who are young up and coming players, don't work out, you've done what United have always done, wasted money. However, what we've got here is the type of players you thought we would probably go for. Up and coming players who've got something they can offer right now, but also long term, and they don't cost a fortune. And also, another aspect of it as well, the wages aren't ridiculous. I doubt very much Joshua Zirkzee is on 350k a week. Yeah, that's what Jadon Sancho came in on, apparently, according to most of the common reports. So it makes a lot of sense. The only trouble is, sometimes like doing sensible things, especially with what United have done in the transfer market in the past, can seem a little bit underwhelming, because you're looking at it, you haven't got that great big shiny Casemiro. Where's that great, that Sancho or that Ronaldo or whatever? But it makes more sense, and it shouldn't leave us in the dirt.
A couple of things you mentioned there. One is the wages and the structure. We've got a graphic. We'll put it on the screen now, and you can see there that Varane's wages last year alone, or what would have been this year, because we could have done that extension, I think, if we wanted to, was 17.8 million pounds, or certainly 17. The new transfers, because the way you amortise the numbers, and I mentioned this yesterday, but we can see it on the screen here, none of those players with their fee and their wages for this year will cost the same as just Varane's wages would have done in a year. Like, people talking about De Ligt being a lot of money. his transfer fee for the year plus his wages for the year is less than what Varane was on, and he's the most expensive, and everyone else is cheaper than that. Like, that's a big thing, and like you mentioned, the PR and how players are spoken about. If Anthony costs 35 million, which we maybe could have got him for, which is probably maybe not even worth, but we'll never truly know what his potential is because he's partly been crushed by his price tag. Maguire was well on the way to being crushed by his price tag, and he's managed to somehow turn it around. But this happens a lot. Paul Pogba, the same. If he'd have cost 60 instead of 90, I think we would have seen one of the best midfielders in the world while he was at Man United. The amount of pressure and stick and constant attention these players get because of their fees and price tags changes how they play.
I think there was a real big moment in football in like the tens of like 2014-15 where big billionaires got involved, and it just became quite a ridiculous thing that
around
fees,
the sort of PSG takeover
even
time.
City get involved, and you look at Madrid, and I still think we're feeling the effects of that slightly. And what has changed is businessmen with tighter pockets, and they saw that inflation of spending £200 million on Neymar is just not sustainable, and they've managed to the clever clubs have managed to just really shrink it, probably using great scouts as well to go, right, what do we need there? Okay, well, that club's going to charge us double, but that club has got a good player. Probably our coaching team can get him to be a better player. Let's go buy them. Let's go and shrink our wage bill.
It's a good point that the transfer record fee hasn't been broken in about 6 years.
Yeah.
When it was getting broken regularly for a while. I
don't see it ever being broken.
Ronaldo, Bale, Pogba, Mbappe, Neymar. Now all the biggest names that move, they're end of their contracts. Yeah. Lewandowski, Ronaldo, I think Neymar was the same, Messi's the same. People can't Mbappe this summer. People can't afford 150, 200 million. It doesn't work.
It's kind of insane as well how you could spend over 100 million quid on a player and him not work out. Yeah. Like Coutinho at Barcelona didn't really work out. It worked out for Liverpool, but it didn't work out for Barcelona. I think he didn't end up scoring a couple of goals against them when he was out on loan at Bayern Munich in the Champions League, which is just ridiculous and shows how disastrous that move on. Was it João Felix who went for massive money to Atletico?
Yeah,
that never really worked out, did it? No. If we're being brutally honest.
I've got the list here. If we go through the sort of top 10, and we'll move on, but just because United for a long time was sort of fighting in these battles. Yeah. The biggest transfers of all time, we don't need to go through the fees, are Mbappe to PSG, Neymar to PSG. I mean, Mbappe definitely worked. Neymar probably was successful, just about. Coutinho
You'd want
to
a Champions
Barcelona.
League, though, wouldn't you?
You would. You absolutely would.
100%.
Coutinho to Barcelona, disaster. Unmitigated disaster. Ousmane Dembele to Barcelona, disaster. João Felix to Atletico Madrid. I'm not going to say disaster, but
massively underwhelming.
Yeah. Enzo Fernandez to Chelsea, so far borderline disaster. Eden Hazard to Real Madrid, one of the biggest disasters in the history of football transfers. He got there, barely played, got fat, retired. Jack Grealish to Man City, again not a disaster, but
it's all right.
3 goals and 3 assists in your second season.
14 goals since he's been there. I think he's got away with it because obviously they've won trophies.
Antoine Griezmann to Barcelona, again disaster. And another one rounding out is Cristiano Ronaldo to Juventus, success. But most of them are disasters, and people have learned, and United seem to be finally learning that 90 million euros for Antony, 70 million for Casemiro, 90 for Pogba, all the numbers we've mentioned, you've got no higher success rate in those big transfers than you do in the 40, 50, 60 million transfers. And the great thing about those, like you said, is you don't get this constant barrage of you have to play them, and if they get anything less than world-class output, they're shit. It's completely different, and it's obviously better, and I'm so glad United have done it. Let's move on to the next point then. This is the academy, where obviously one of the few areas where United are one of the better teams in terms of bringing players through to play in the first team. And if that's the only thing you want an academy for, United are still one of the best in the world. And I'll stand by that. And I think we have been, even under the Glazers.
That is United DNA. People talk about United DNA. And I've seen Manchester United play a million different ways in terms of styles and how we play football. I know we all say we like wingers and all the rest of it, but it's not been the same style. It's not been the same sort of structure or ethos at times, other than the academy is part of what makes Manchester United great, and we lean on that academy and we give opportunities to those academy players, and we always have an academy player in our squad, and usually 1 or 2 in the team, not just on the bench, but usually you will have academy players starting for Manchester United. Even now, Marcus Rashford's probably going to start the weekend. Alejandro Garnacho has a good chance he'll start. They've both come through the academy. Kobe Mainoo, of course, has come through the academy. There's a good chance he'll start as well. So you've always got this sort of connection with your academy, and that's something that needs nurturing, because there has been moments where you look at the academy and you think City are in danger of stealing a march on us. Chelsea, I think they won about 4 or 5 FA Youth Cup finals on the spin. I think they were at one point overtaking us or getting near our record. And you look and you go, we have to be careful here. But I feel like Manchester United have managed to maintain the academy, and hopefully now with INEOS as well coming in, we're seeing that taken up a notch. We know we've just had this fantastic season with the academy, and they've gone and brought this kid in from Arsenal as well, and this 16-year-old, Chido Obi Martin, who looks, he's just in terms of his numbers, I've not seen a lot of the kid, but his numbers are phenomenal. So it looks like INEOS are taking a good look at that academy. And just from a business point of view, if you nurture your academy, especially with PSI and all the rest of it, and you can get players that come in, even if those players aren't necessarily good enough for Manchester United, if you can get money for them, you can get your 10 million euros from Willy Camboala, or your, whatever other academy players we've gone out, and you get a little bit of money, 40 million euros, whatever it is for Mason Greenwood. I know there's reasons behind that we don't need to get into, but if you can get that money and it's all profit, then you're laughing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big ways Chelsea have massively outsold United in terms of money they've made from selling players is through that academy. They sweep up a lot of the young talent across Europe, and I don't want United to be a farm for buying and selling youngsters without ever giving them a chance. I don't want that. But I think if United could have more of an eye on players coming in and having value to other clubs, even if they don't have a value for United, because I think those used to be those stats of most players playing in sort of Europe who came through each different club's academy. And at the top was always Barcelona, Ajax, Man United. Yeah. Like, we're the ones who give the most Premier League footballers to Europe out of anyone. And I think United need to be fairly compensated for the fact that we consistently bring through top players. Maybe they're not quite good enough for United, but if you're playing for Wigan or Burnley or Villarreal, we should be getting 5, 10, 50 million euros for these players, and that will massively help keep everything ticking over. So I think that's a big thing. Stadium, Joe McGrath. Yes, this is another thing that has been massively different already since INEOS have come in. We've seen, I think Ratcliffe seems pretty clear to me that he wants a brand new stadium, £2 billion. We've already seen human beings that we're aware of come in, Sebco being one of them. I think Gary Neville's been spoken to and been part of it as well. Other people the task force that designed all the stadiums.
Drastover and Must has been on it as well. A few others.
It's become a sort of tangible, real thing, hasn't it, this new stadium already?
It is.
Is that something that you've been impressed by?
It's impressive how quick they've moved towards looking at the new stadium. They know that was a problem at Man United, and they know that they were sort of getting ridiculed throughout the social media from the waterfalls of last season, but they've put the certain right people in place to go and try and figure out what the best option is for Man United. And the new stadium will worry some, but I think maybe Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to look at that new stadium, know that it might take 10, 11, 12 years to build, and as a 75-year-old man might see that as his final bit of legacy that he leaves to this world. Only if he finishes about 85, 90, he could still live for however long. But that might be his shining light, his incredible achievement, that he built this incredible new £2-3 billion stadium in the north, not too far away from where he was born, and that will be there for years and years and years to come, and be probably the best stadium in the country. So I think he's got his heart on that. There will be other people arguing about what to do with Old Trafford, and I know there's been talks about it being still used, which if we're going to build a new Old Trafford, please keep the old one. I know that brings up all sorts of where does everyone park and what people do and shit like that. But I would hate for us to build a new one and demolish the old. That's what I wouldn't like.
Jay, the new stadium, are you impressed with how quickly they've acted on this? Because we've already, I know it's not the same, but Carrington is being worked on right now. The stadium is being worked on plans-wise right now. Has that impressed you?
Yeah, I think it was necessary, and I know that people were sort of, and I get it, you have that emotional attachment to Old Trafford, and I've got that, some of my best memories ever at Old Trafford, and people didn't want to see that go, they wanted to see it revamped. But I think you have to sort of admit defeat almost at some point and go, how many times can you keep revamping a stadium that's over 100 years old, whatever it is? It needs rebuilding. We can see that Old Trafford, it's crumbling, it's not fit for purpose. And I think if you could have a situation where, as Joe was mentioning there, maybe it's not down to a 30,000 seater stadium that's used for the academy and the women's team, and you have the new stadium near it, right next to it, because I think Manchester United own all that land, then that'd be the best of both worlds. So I'm glad they've come in and they've looked at the stadium. It's the one thing the Glazers never even pretended to do. Yeah. The Glazers pretended to do a lot, but they didn't. I don't think they ever said, "Oh, we're going to build a new stadium. Or we're going to adjust it." They didn't even, they didn't even try and con us on that one, which is a rarity for them. So yeah, I hope we do get a new stadium, and I hope it is, the shining light that Joe's mentioned.
We talked about the academy then, and obviously you got the women's team as well. And with the legacy of Man United, and you talked about how incredible our academy is. If they get to week in, week out play at Old Trafford, and that's where
or even if it's the Jimmy Murphy Stadium or the Matt Busby Stadium or whatever, and then the new stadium's called Old Trafford. That would be incredible.
To know that the future generations coming through, the 15, 16, 18-year-olds who are going to be the stars of the future, play at where Man United made history. Yeah. That can only help us. For that part.
A couple of other things as well that we need to look into as well is the coaching team overhaul. Out with the likes of Mitchell van der Gaag, in with Ruud van Nistelrooy as the new assistant. We've got René Harker in there as well. Pretty much all the coaches around Ten Hag from the start of last season have now left and been replaced. Were you surprised at how much sort of revolution there's been in that regard? Because I thought that's the one thing they probably wouldn't touch, that nucleus in and around Ten Hag. You can keep McLaren, you can keep Van der Gaag, but we'll switch everything else. It's literally everything except the manager has been changed at Man United.
So rare, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know Fergie always used to change his coaches, or freshen it up, or coaches would leave, they get offered a bigger job in terms of, like, instead of being a coach at Manchester United, you can go manage Real Madrid or whatever, or I think it was Carlos Queiroz when they did something like that, and Brian Kidd left to go to Blackburn. But to lose the likes of Steve McLaren, likes of Benny McCarthy, likes of Mitch van der Gaag all at once is a bit surprising, to be honest with you. And he's obviously coaches that he brought in, that I think him and Steve McLaren in particular have known each other for years. But if he's happy with it, and I presume he is, and look at the calibre of the coaches that have come in, listen, I might say a lot of things, I might do a lot of things. One thing I will never do is moan about Ruud van Nistelrooy coming back to Manchester United. Yeah. So it makes sense. And again, similar to the Lenny Oro situation, I think we'll see what happens. We'll have to wait and see if it is a success, if it's workable. I'm not saying these aren't talented coaches. I'm not buzzing that Ruud van Nistelrooy is back at Old Trafford. I'm just saying we'll have to see if this manager and these coaches are the right fit. But if they're not, we can see from anything else, they ain't going to mess about. They'll change again. It somehow. Yeah, they will. Whether that's a new coaching team or new coaches coming in or a new manager.
Another thing, Joe, that's been something that United fans have cried out for a long time, that we are seeing to start to change as well. And this is one of the things that maybe we call for changes from a sort of blind perspective, is the medical team. Everyone goes, there's been loads of injuries, so the medical staff must be crap. Which really, we don't know that.
Paramedics?
Not new paramedics, no.
Oh, no, I follow the guy. No, never mind.
Everyone goes, why have we had so many injuries? It must be the person who's, holding the scanner or whatever. Like it can't be the player. And rightly or wrongly, we have seen a big change there as well. And Laurie mentions that Ten Hag wants his medical staff to have a strong relationship with players where they carry authority to get them to do their rehab and recovery work. So a slightly different way to sort of liaise with the staff. But also we've seen different doctors come in and come and go. We've seen different medical teams come in the last few months as well. It's just sort of everything's being looked at, isn't it? Are you surprised by the sort of scale and the detail of this?
I think what the medical team, you'd say that it was a little bit of a crisis, wouldn't you? Because of what happened last year, and when something in a business or in a team happens so much, the alarm bells must be ringing. And I know injuries is quite tricky to sort of nail down as a cause for them all, because they all happen individually, don't they? Yep. But the recovery and getting people back up to fighting fit for Man United was something I'm sure they looked at. I'm just happy that all the details are being examined. This is a group of people that want Man United back winning Premier Leagues.
Yeah, that's massive, isn't it?
It's big.
I just think overall,
huge.
I'm surprised and impressed by the scale of the changes. I think the speed of the changes has been miraculous, and maybe within that we may see a few mistakes, and over the next 6, 12, 9 months, like you sort of mentioned before, Jay, maybe there'll be a second sort of mini refresh in some of these areas, because what are the odds that we've changed 25 people at Man United and they were all the bang on the right person? But I think we're finally being ran like a proper football club, and this article goes through some of that detail and just shows that United are such a big club that if we start doing things as well as the teams around us, like, or even maybe not quite as well, but right on the line. You know, if we're almost as good as City, the size of us as a fan base, as a club, as just a sort of momentum machine, I think it won't be long until United are back challenging at the top. And I'm not predicting that for this season, and there may be new managers, new staff, new coaches along the way. But if we start doing things properly, some of the stuff we've mentioned there about how badly it's been run for the last decade and how different we already are 6 months into INEOS, I think for me personally, it can't be that long before we're at least in that ballpark challenging for the big trophies again. It just feels almost inevitable. Do things properly, do things the right way, and the size of the club will almost take care of the rest.
If you'd have made a wish list before INEOS came in of things you wanted them to do, that's the list we've just read out.
Yeah.
That's the list we've just gone through. Sort out the coaching staff, sort out the structure, sort out the, I mean, other than the layoffs, I don't think we'd have said that,
no.
But sort out the approach to transfers, sort out the stadium, sort out the academy. It's just, that's all the things we'd have gone like, look, these are what you need to do, and these are what they're doing. So, yes, we'll wait and see if it is a success, but it's certainly, to me, I think, I don't want to get carried away, but I think Manchester United will be the dominant force over the next decade.
Right. Joe, any thoughts?
Just
what he said.
Life.
We'll see in a bit.